I am Benjamin Reed, 70 years old, and the founder of an empire I built with my bare hands and the love of my life. I walked into the restaurant wearing the same old clothes. Just as I expected, Amelia and Leo fell right into the trap. They screamed, they shouted, and they demanded the manager kick me out. The scene played out exactly as I knew it would. But this time, when the manager rushed over, he didn't look at them. He looked at me. Their faces went pale. Their jaws dropped. But before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you how I took back everything you need to know how the betrayal began. It started 3 weeks earlier on the day of my 70th birthday. It was a cold Tuesday, and the silence in my small condo was deafening. I am living alone now. For 45 years, my life had been filled with the sound of my wife, Isabella. Her laughter was the soundtrack to my life, the fuel that built my empire. But cancer took her 3 years ago. It was fast, and it was brutal. The silence she left behind is a physical weight I carry every single day. I looked at the clock. 5 p.m. It was time to go. My son Leo and his wife Amelia were throwing me a surprise party. I only knew because Amelia had accidentally included me on the group text planning it 2 weeks prior. "Don't tell Dad," her text read. I didn't have the heart to tell them I knew. I put on a simple sweater, the one Isabella had bought me 5 Christmases ago. It still smelled faintly of her perfume. I grabbed the keys to my 10-year-old Buick and drove across town to their mansion. Mansion. That's the only word for it. A sprawling 6-bedroom palace of glass and stone in the wealthiest part of the city. As I pulled up the long driveway past the fountain and the fleet of European cars, I felt that familiar bitter pang in my chest. This house was built with my grief. When Isabella passed, I couldn't stand living in our old family home anymore. The memories were in the walls, in the kitchen, in the garden she loved. I sold it. I gave every single penny of the sale, nearly $2 million, to Leo and Amelia. "Buy your dream house," I told them. "Start your family right. Build a life your mother would be proud of." They certainly took my money. I walked in. The party was loud. The house was filled with people I didn't recognize. They were Amelia's friends, mostly all in their 40s, dressed in designer clothes, sipping champagne, laughing too loudly. Leo saw me, gave me a quick, one-armed hug. "Happy birthday, Dad. Glad you made it." He seemed distracted, already looking over my shoulder for someone more important. I felt invisible. I felt like the help. I wandered through my son's home, the one I paid for, and no one spoke to me. I was just the old man in the corner. Amelia finally swept over, air-kissing the space near my cheek. She smelled like expensive wine. "Benjamin, happy birthday. We have a gift for you." She handed me a small, brightly wrapped box. I opened it. Inside was a cheap ceramic coffee mug. It had "World's Greatest Dad" printed on it in goofy, colorful letters. It probably cost $5 at a gas station. I looked at the mug. Then I looked at the $1 million painting hanging on their wall. I looked at the $2 million house I paid for. This was a slap in the face. It was a message. It said, "You are cheap. You are an afterthought. You are disposable." I forced a smile, the kind of smile you use when you're in pain. "Thank you, Amelia. It's thoughtful." She smiled, that bright, false smile that never reached her cold eyes. "We knew you'd love it." Later, after they cut the cake I didn't want, after the empty singing, Amelia pulled me aside. She guided me near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the massive glowing pool. Her voice dropped to that sickly sweet, confidential tone. "Ben," she said, placing her manicured hand on my arm. "There's something Leo and I wanted to talk to you about. It's about the Isabella Reed Charity Gala next week." My heart lifted for the first time all night. The gala was the one night of the year that still mattered to me. It was my wife's legacy. I founded it in her name using our money to support the families of restaurant workers who fell on hard times. Yes, I said, expecting her to finally ask me to make the opening speech, something Leo had forgotten to do for the last 2 years. Amelia's smile tightened. We've been thinking, and we just think it's best if you don't attend this year. The sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, it all faded away. The world went silent. What? She squeezed my arm as if talking to a child. We just worry about you, Dad. You've been so tired. You look frail. She looked me up and down at my old sweater. The gala is so stressful. All those important donors, the press, the speeches. It's a lot of pressure. Pressure, I repeated, my voice hollow. Amelia, I founded that gala. I built the restaurant empire that funds that gala. I know, she said, patting my hand condescendingly. And we honor you for that. But it's time for you to rest. Leo and I can handle it. We will handle everything in your name. I looked past her. Across the room, my son Leo, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had handed my entire life's work to, was laughing with a group of investors. He caught my eye. He gave me a quick nod, confirming her words. They were united in this. They weren't asking me. They were telling me. I was being banned. Banned from my own wife's charity event. I was stunned. I felt the blood drain from my face. Why? Why were they so desperate to keep me away? I stared at Amelia, the fake sympathy on her face making my stomach turn. Banned? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Amelia, that gala. It's your mother's legacy. It's my legacy. She flinched at the sharpness in my tone. Benjamin, please lower your voice. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene. Dad, what's going on? Leo's voice boomed from behind me. He walked over, all confidence and expensive cologne, and draped a heavy arm over my shoulders. He still had that politician's smile I had taught him, the one meant to disarm. Amelia's just explaining that you think I'm… What was the word? Frail. Leo laughed, a practiced, hearty laugh that didn't match the coldness in his eyes. Dad, look at yourself. You look tired. We're just worried about you. Amelia nodded, latching onto his excuse. Exactly, Ben. We were just saying that gala is such a high-pressure event. You know, all the big investors, the press, the photographers. It's a long, stressful night. I looked at her, I looked at my son. Stressful, I said. Leo, for 40 years, I built Reed's Steakhouse and Grill from a single 20-seat diner into a national brand. I dealt with recessions, food shortages, fires, and critics. You think a charity dinner is going to be stressful for me? Leo's grip on my shoulder tightened just a fraction. It wasn't a hug anymore. It was a warning. Of course not, Dad. You're a legend, he said smoothly. But you've earned the right to relax. You've done the hard part. It's our turn to take on the burden. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, reasonable tone that I knew he used to close business deals. Just rest, Dad. Please. You deserve it. Enjoy your birthday. Let us handle this. We will take care of everything, all in your name. You don't need to worry your head about all the complicated details. Complicated details. That phrase hit me harder than the $5 mug. It echoed in the empty space where my heart used to be. These complicated details were my life. The food costs, the supply chains, the donor relationships, the marketing strategies. I invented those details. I looked at my son's handsome, earnest face. I saw his mother in his eyes, in the shape of his jaw. I remembered what Isabella had said to me just weeks before she passed. She was weak, holding my hand, her voice a thin thread. Promise me, Ben, she'd whispered. Promise me you'll trust Leo. He's smart. He's ready. Let him take the reins. Let him carry our legacy. I had promised her. I had promised my dying wife that I would trust our son. That promise was the only thing holding me upright. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just an old man tired and grieving. Maybe I was seeing shadows where there was only concern. I forced my shoulders to slump. I let out a long breath, playing the part they had cast for me. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice sounding defeated even to my own ears. I guess I am just tired. Amelia's face flooded with relief. She beamed, "Oh, good. We're so glad you understand. See, we just want what's best for you." Leo clapped my back. "That's the spirit, Dad. Now go have some more cake. Mingle." But I couldn't. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. "No," I said, stepping away from his arm. "I think I'll just call it a night. It's been a long day. Thank you for the party." I didn't wait for their goodbyes. I walked out of the party, past the laughing strangers, past the fountain I had paid for, and got into my old car. I drove home through the dark streets, the cheap ceramic mug sitting on the passenger seat mocking me. I sat in my silent condo for hours, not even bothering to turn on the lights. I just stared at the skyline, replaying Leo's words over and over. "You don't need to worry your head about all the complicated details." He wasn't just sidelining me. He was dismissing me. He had forgotten who I was. I was Benjamin Reed. I started with nothing. I worked 19-hour days. I washed dishes, I scrubbed floors, I butchered my own meat because I couldn't afford a supplier. I built an empire from the dirt, an empire my son was now enjoying. And I was damn sure going to find out why he was so desperate to keep me away from my own complicated details. Sleep didn't come. I sat in my armchair as the gray light of dawn filtered into the condo. The cheap mug Amelia had given me sat on the kitchen counter, an accusation in porcelain. Complicated details. Leo's words. They were the key. They were the lie. When you've been in business for 45 years, you develop an instinct. You can smell a bad deal, a nervous partner, or a hidden agenda from a mile away. My son was hiding something. They didn't want me at that gala not because I was frail, but because they were planning something they didn't want me to see. My stomach churned. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't polished and cold, someone who remembered where we came from. I needed to see Maya. I didn't bother calling. I just drove. I left the sterile upscale neighborhood of my condo and drove downtown to the old district. I parked the Buick behind the diner. This was it, the original, the place where Isabella and I had started it all 50 years ago with a 10-seat counter and a second-hand grill. The sign, the original neon one, was still there, humming. I had kept this one location exactly as it was a museum of our dream. I pushed open the door. The smell of real coffee, frying bacon, and worn-in vinyl hit me. It was the smell of home. The diner was half full with the breakfast rush. Cops, construction workers, a few city hall types in suits. And there was Maya in the middle of it all. My daughter. She was Isabella's heart walking around on Earth. She had her mother's dark, curly hair and her kind, intelligent eyes. She wasn't in a power suit like Leo. She was wearing jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a Reed's Diner apron, the original logo. She was clearing plates from a table herself, laughing with the customers. She looked up, saw me, and her face broke into a genuine, beautiful smile. "Dad, what are you doing here so early?" She rushed over and gave me a real hug, one that I could feel. "Happy birthday for yesterday. I'm so sorry I missed the party. I had to cover a shift for Maria. Her kid is sick." "It's all right, honey," I said, my throat thick. "You didn't miss much." She looked at me closely, her smile fading. She always could read me just like her mother. "What's wrong? You look like you didn't sleep." "Let's sit," I said. She led me to the back booth, booth 4. It was our booth. The vinyl was cracked, the table scarred with decades of use. It was the exact spot where Isabella and I had sat all those years ago sketching out the floor plan for our first real steakhouse on a napkin. Maya slid in across from me, her expression all concern. "Talk to me, Dad. What did they do?" She never minced words. I told her. I told her about the $5 mug. I told her about feeling invisible. And then I told her about the gala. "They asked me not to come, Maya. They said they were worried about me, that it was too stressful, that I looked frail." I watched my daughter's face. The warmth disappeared. It was replaced by a cold, protective anger that I recognized. It was Isabella's "don't mess with my family" face. Maya put her coffee cup down very, very slowly. "Dad," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I was hoping it wasn't true. I was hoping I was just being paranoid." My gut tightened. "What do you mean you knew?" "No, not about them banning you. That's disgusting." She shook her head, furious. "But I've been worried, Dad. About the fund. About Leo." She leaned forward. "I didn't want to bother you with it. You trusted him with the company, and I'm just running this little diner. But I'm also supposed to be co-managing the Isabella Fund. Or I was." "What did he do?" "He's been sidelining me for months. First he moved the fund's accounts from our local bank to the big corporate bank in New York, said it was for better returns. Then he replaced the entire advisory board, the people you and Mom trusted for decades, with his own guys." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because every time I questioned him, he treated me like a child," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "He'd say, 'Maya, honey, don't worry your pretty head about it. This is big league stuff. Just focus on your little hamburgers.' He's as condescending to me as he is to you." She took a deep breath, and I knew the real blow was coming. "Dad, he pushed through a transfer last week. I tried to stop it. I tried to get a hold of you, but you were on your fishing trip." "What transfer?" $500,000. I just stared at her. 500,000. He moved it directly from the Isabella Reed Charity Fund to the Reed's Steakhouse corporate marketing account. I couldn't speak. That wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. I confronted him. Maya said, her eyes flashing. I told him he couldn't do that. That it was charity money, Mom's money. I asked him what on earth he could be marketing for a gala that would cost $500,000. "And what did he say?" I whispered. "He told me to mind my own business. He said it was a brand-building expense, that the gala needed to be bigger, flashier to attract better donors. He said it was just synergy." She looked me dead in the eye, her own pain mirroring mine. $500,000, Dad. And now they're banning you from even attending. I couldn't process the number. $500,000. I just stared at my daughter. The sounds of the diner, the clatter of plates, the morning chatter, it all just faded into a dull roar. $500,000, I said, my voice flat. For marketing. That's what he called it, Dad. Maya said, her hands gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles were white. Synergy. I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound that didn't belong in our warm, sunlit diner. Synergy, I repeated. I leaned back in the cracked vinyl booth. I had to explain to my own daughter just how insane that number was, because she had only ever known the fund as a healthy, growing entity. I had to tell her where it came from. Your mother started that fund with the money she saved. I said, my voice thick. Not me, her. From her teaching salary before the steakhouses ever made a dime. I didn't know that, Dad. Of course you didn't. She wasn't one to brag. When her father, your grandfather, got sick, he was a line cook, just like the ones in this kitchen. He couldn't work. They couldn't pay for his medicine. They lost their apartment. Your mother watched him die feeling helpless. I pointed to the wall to an old framed photo of Isabella and me, young and smiling, holding the keys to the diner. When we finally made it, when the steakhouses were successful, she made me promise. She said, "Ben, we can't let what happened to my father happen to anyone else in our family." And I asked her, "Who is our family?" I met Maya's eyes. "And your mother said, everyone who works for us, Ben, everyone who flips a burger or washes a dish. They are our family." That, I said, tapping the table, is what the Isabella Fund is. It's not a corporate slush fund. It's sacred. It's medical bills for a waitress whose child has leukemia. It's rent for a busboy whose apartment burned down. It's a plane ticket for a cook to go home and bury his mother. I know, Dad, that's why I tried to stop him. And the gala. I almost laughed again. Maya, you've been to every gala since you were a child. When have we ever paid for it? The hotels give us the ballroom. The food suppliers donate the steaks. The wineries donate the wine. We've never spent more than $100,000 in our worst year, and that was for security and insurance. $500,000 for brand building. That's not marketing, Maya. That's theft. My gut instinct from the party, the feeling of being dismissed, it all snapped into sharp, ugly focus. This wasn't just my son being a condescending fool. This was something dark. This was calculated. Maya must have seen the look on my face. She reached across the table, her voice dropping. Dad, there's more. That's not the only thing he did. What else? The board, the fund's advisory board. He replaced them. He replaced Frank and Shirley. He replaced Father Michael. These were our oldest friends. People who had sat at our dinner table, who had held Leo and Maya when they were babies. People who loved Isabella. All of them, Maya said, her voice breaking. He called an emergency vote 2 months ago, said the board needed new energy and modern financial expertise. He replaced them all with his people. Guys from his MBA program. People who work for Amelia's father. Stranger's dad. And you? I asked, my blood running cold. He didn't replace you. He tried. He told me I should focus on the diner. I told him he could fire me from the board, but I would go to the press. He backed down. She let out a shaky breath. But it doesn't matter. He left my name on the letterhead, but he took away my check signing authority. He's the only one with power now. He just left me there to make it look legitimate. Because I'm family. I understood. I finally understood. They hadn't just banned me from the party to spare my feelings. They had banned me because I was the only person alive who would look at the budget, ask the right questions, and spot the theft in a single second. They were systematically, carefully locking down the fund. They were isolating it, removing anyone loyal to Isabella, and preparing to drain it. And my 70th birthday, my frail state, was the perfect excuse to get me the final obstacle out of the way. My own son, stealing from his mother's grave. I stood up from the booth. Dad, where are you going? Maya asked, alarmed. Are you going to confront him? No. I said, my voice was calm now. It was the old calm I used to get before a big, nasty fight. Not yet. I'm not going to do anything. Yet. I put my hand on her shoulder. Maya, you listen to me. This is very important. You don't say a word. Not to Leo. Not to Amelia. Not to anyone. You go about your work. You serve your hamburgers. You are not to let them know that we have spoken. She looked scared, but she nodded. Dad, what are you going to do? I'm going to find out exactly what those complicated details are, I said, pulling my old hat on. I need to make some calls. I walked out of the warm, honest diner and into the cold city street. I wasn't just a grieving retiree anymore. I was the man who built this empire, and I was about to find out who was trying to burn it down. I left the diner with a cold knot in my stomach. I gave Maya one last look, a silent promise that I would handle this. I drove back to my condo, not in a daze, but in a focused, cold rage. My son, my own son, was stealing from his dead mother's legacy. The boy I had given everything to. $500,000 for marketing. The lie was so lazy, so arrogant. He didn't even try to make it believable. As I sat in my quiet living room, I tried to think like an investigator, not a father. A father is blind. An investigator looks for patterns. What had I missed? Leo was smart, but Amelia was reckless. She was arrogant. She loved to show off. She lived her entire life on her phone, documenting every trivial, expensive moment. I remembered she had a public social media profile. She had once insisted I follow her so I could see all the wonderful things they were doing with the family name. I hadn't looked at it in months. I found her page. It was exactly as I remembered, a curated feed of someone pretending to be royalty. I scrolled. Photo after photo. Amelia at a polo match, #charity. Amelia holding a new $5,000 handbag, #retail therapy. Amelia and Leo at a black tie event, #power couple. Every post was a performance. Every caption was a testament to her vanity. I scrolled past weeks of this noise, past endless pictures of expensive dinners, past videos of her clinking champagne glasses with her equally shallow friends. And then I stopped, my breath caught in my throat. The post was from 6 weeks ago, right around the time Maya said Leo had replaced the board. Right around the time he had taken that $500,000. It was a series of photos. The first one showed Leo and Amelia wrapped in expensive ski gear kissing in front of a massive modern multi-level house. It wasn't a cabin. It was an architectural masterpiece of glass and cedar set against the snow-covered mountains of Colorado. The next photo was the view from the deck, a breathtaking expanse of the Aspen Valley. The last photo was of them toasting with champagne in front of a towering stone fireplace. The caption, I read the caption 3 times just to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. Finally, our very own place to get away from it all, it's official. So excited to finally close on our Aspen Dream Lodge, #Aspen Life, #blessed, #hard work pays off. I stared at the screen, my hands starting to shake. Aspen. Not a weekend rental. Not a timeshare. Our very own place. I wasn't a real estate expert, but I had built a national company. I knew what a house like that cost in Aspen, Colorado. It wasn't $500,000. It was $5 million, maybe more. I clicked on the photo. I looked at my son's smiling face, his arm wrapped possessively around his wife. Hard work pays off, the caption read. He had posted that. He had dared to post that. I thought back to the $500,000 transfer. I had been thinking too small. I had been thinking Leo was just skimming, just padding an expense account. This was not skimming. This was a heist. The $500,000 wasn't for the house. It was just the tip of the iceberg. It was just the amount Maya had managed to catch. How much more had I missed? I sat back, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. A multi-million-dollar vacation home. Where in God's name did my son get that kind of money? I closed the social media app. I sat there in my small, quiet apartment, the silence suddenly feeling cold, hostile. My mind, the same mind that had calculated payrolls and food costs and profit margins for 45 years, began to run the numbers. It was an automatic reflex. I couldn't stop it. Leo's salary. I knew his salary to the dollar. I had signed off on his promotion to Chief Operating Officer myself, one of my last acts before I stepped back. $400,000 a year. It was a generous salary, more than I ever paid myself. A salary designed to give him and his family everything they could ever want. But let's do the math. $400,000. After federal and state taxes in a high tax bracket, what's left? Maybe $250,000 if he was lucky. Let's call it $20,000 a month take home. Now the expenses, their mansion, The one I paid the $2 million down payment for. They still had a massive mortgage on the rest. I knew the interest rates. That mortgage had to be at least $10,000, maybe $12,000 a month. So we're down to $8,000 a month. Then there was Amelia. Her spending was legendary. The clothes, the jewelry, the parties, the new Mercedes she got every 2 years, the $5,000 handbags she called investments. Their 2 children were in the most expensive private school in the state. That was another $60,000 a year. $5,000 a month. We're down to $3,000 a month. And from that $3,000, they had to pay for utilities on a 6-bedroom mansion, multiple car payments, insurance, property taxes, and their extravagant social life. The numbers didn't just add up. They were upside down. They were bleeding money. They should have been in debt up to their eyeballs, not closing on a multi-million-dollar vacation home. There was no legal mathematical way for them to afford that Aspen Lodge. I looked around my own apartment. It was a simple 2-bedroom place. Clean, comfortable, modest. My rent was paid by my Social Security check. My personal pension, which I had separated from the company decades ago, paid for my food, my gas, and my small donations to the local library. I lived simply. I drove a 10-year-old Buick. I spent 3 days a week volunteering at the downtown soup kitchen, serving meals to men who had less than me. My greatest pleasure was reading a good book or having a quiet cup of coffee. Isabella and I, we never lived like Leo and Amelia. Even when the steakhouses were making millions, we stayed in our original family home. We saved. We invested. We built the company not so we could buy toys, but so it would be secure, so it would outlive us, so it could provide for our employees, for our children, and for the fund. We taught our children that money was a responsibility, a tool to do good, not a scorecard. At least I thought we had. Where did Leo get this hunger, this bottomless, desperate need to show everyone how rich he was, and more importantly, where did he get the money? It couldn't be loans. His debt-to-income ratio would be a disaster. No bank would give him another mortgage. It had to be cash. A massive, untraceable infusion of cash. My mind flashed back to Maya's face, pale with worry, in the diner this morning. $500,000, from the fund to the marketing account. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. The $500,000 transfer. It wasn't for the gala, and it wasn't for the Aspen House. It was just one transaction, one withdrawal, one single pull from the account. How many other withdrawals had there been? How many other marketing expenses Leo had replaced the board? He had locked Maya out. He had banned me from the one event where the financials were discussed. It all clicked into place, a horrible, perfect, sickening picture. My son wasn't just skimming. He wasn't just padding an expense account. He was emptying it. A cold, terrible certainty settled over me. They weren't just pushing me aside. They weren't just disrespecting my wife's memory. They were actively, systematically, and deliberately stealing from her. They were taking money meant for dying cooks and homeless waitresses, and they were using it to buy a ski lodge. I sat in my quiet apartment, the screen of my phone glowing with Amelia's hypocrisy. An Aspen Lodge, a multi-million-dollar monument to their greed. The anger was so intense it felt like a heart attack, a hot pressure in my chest. But I couldn't move. I couldn't act, because I still didn't have proof. A gut feeling is not evidence. A social media post is not a bank statement. If I confronted Leo now, he would lie. He would call me old, confused, paranoid. He would say it was a rental. He would say it was a gift from Amelia's family. He would have a dozen plausible, polished excuses, and I would look like a jealous old fool. Number 1. I would not be the frail old man they wanted me to be. I was a businessman, and a businessman needs data. I stood up. I put on my coat. I needed to get inside the system. I drove to the Reed Enterprises headquarters, the glass tower I had built, the one with my name carved into the granite facade. I didn't park in my reserved founder's spot by the entrance. I parked in the general garage on level 3 with the junior associates. I was already thinking like an infiltrator. I walked into the lobby. The new receptionist, a young woman Leo had hired, looked up, her smile bright but manufactured. "Mr. Reed." "What a wonderful surprise. Are you here for the luncheon committee meeting?" "Just visiting my old office, Karen," I said, walking past her before she could buzz my son. I took the private elevator to the top floor, to the corner office. My office. Leo had insisted I keep it. "Out of respect, Dad," he'd said. "It's always here for you." I saw the lie in that now. He didn't want me in the operational offices on the floors below. He wanted me contained, isolated, safely tucked away on the executive floor, where I couldn't see the complicated details. I sat down at my old familiar mahogany desk. The computer was new, a sleek black monitor. I moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, asking for a password. I opened the financial portal, the internal dashboard I had designed myself 20 years ago. The one I used to check every single morning before the sun came up to see the health of my empire. My fingers, old but steady, typed in the password. Isabella, 1975. The password had never changed. It would never change. I hit the enter key. I waited. The system processed. And then a red box flashed on the screen. It did not say incorrect password. It said access denied. User profile disabled. Please contact your administrator. I stared at the words. Disabled. Not locked. Not expired. Disabled. This wasn't a glitch. This was a deliberate act. My son had locked me out of the house I built. The rage rose in my throat, hot and choking. I fought it down. Cold is better. Cold is smarter. I picked up the desk phone. I dialed extension 401. Sam Akers, my head of IT. Sam has been with me for 25 years. I hired him when he was just a kid out of college. I paid for his son's medical treatments when his wife lost her job. Sam was loyal. Sam was my guy. He answered on the second ring. Sam Akers IT. "Sam, it's Ben." A dead, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I heard a nervous shuffle of papers. "Mr. Reed, sir," he finally stammered. I didn't expect your call. Is everything all right?" He sounded terrified. He already knew. "I'm fine, Sam. But my computer isn't," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm, perfectly level. "I'm trying to log into the financial dashboard from my old office. It says my profile is disabled. Must be a system glitch. Can you fix it for me?" I was giving him an out. A chance to fix it quietly, to pretend it was a mistake. Another long, agonizing pause. I heard him take a deep, shaky breath. "Mr. Reed, sir, it's not a glitch." "Oh, sir, I'm really sorry. I was just following orders." My knuckles turned white on the receiver. "Whose orders, Sam?" "Mr. Reed, your son's. Mr. Leo Reed, the COO." I closed my eyes. "What orders, Sam? Tell me exactly." He was stammering now, the words tumbling out. "About 3 months ago, sir. Right after you officially stepped back. He submitted a ticket. He requested that your founder-level access be downgraded." "Downgraded to what?" "To read-only, sir. He said it was for security reasons, to prevent. He said, to prevent accidental changes now that you weren't involved in the day-to-day operations. He neutered me. He turned me into a spectator. And now it says, disabled, Sam." I said, my voice like ice. "Read-only is one thing. Disabled is another." I heard the frantic clicking of his keyboard. Click, clack, click. "Ah," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Yes, sir, I see the second ticket now. This one came through last week." My blood went cold. Last week. What day last week, Sam? More clicking. Last Wednesday, sir. The day after your daughter, Ms. Maya Reed, was here questioning the gala transfer. The pieces slammed together. Maya asked questions. So Leo panicked. And he locked me out completely. What did the order say, Sam? Read it to me. He cleared his throat. It says, per COO directive, fully deactivate the legacy founder profile to streamline system security and prevent unauthorized external access. He reclassified your profile as an external vendor account, Mr. Reed. External. Benjamin Reed, was now an external threat to my own company. I see, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of the grave. Mr. Reed, I can try to override it, Sam offered weakly. I can. No, Sam, I interrupted. You did your job. You followed your orders. That's fine. Thank you for your honesty. Sir, I promise I didn't. It's fine, Sam. Thank you. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark, silent office. My office. The rage was gone. It had burned away, leaving behind something hard and pure and indestructible. They didn't just sideline me. They didn't just ban me from a party. They had taken my keys. They had changed the locks. They had systematically, surgically, and deliberately erased me. My son had declared war. I stood up. If they wouldn't let me in through the front door, I would burn the back door down. It was time to call in the old guard. It was time to act. I walked out of the elevator and through the marble lobby. I didn't look at the receptionist. I just walked straight out into the afternoon sun. My mind was clear. Sam was a good man, but he was compromised. His job, his mortgage, his family's security, all of it was tied to Leo. Everyone in that building who drew a paycheck was loyal to the man who signed them. I couldn't trust a single person inside Reed Enterprises. I got into my Buick, the old engine turning over with a reliable rumble. I pulled out of the garage and drove not back to my empty condo, but west out of the city toward the green, rolling hills of the suburbs. I needed someone who wasn't on Leo's payroll. I needed someone who was untouchable. Someone who loved Isabella as much as I did. I needed my old CFO. I pulled out my phone. I didn't have to look up the number. I had known it by heart for 30 years. It rang twice. You've reached George. Leave a message. George, I said, my voice steady. It's Ben. I'm at the Oakwood Club. I need to see you. It's about Isabella. I hung up. I knew he would come. I drove to the Oakwood Country Club. Quiet. Old. The kind of place where business was done with a whisper, not a shout. I wasn't a member, but George was. I sat in the clubhouse grill at a dark table in the back overlooking the 18th green. I ordered a black coffee and waited. 20 minutes later, George Tanaka walked in. He was 75 but looked 60. Fit sharp with the same piercing, intelligent eyes that had scrutinized my balance sheets for 4 decades. He was wearing golf spikes and a polo shirt. He slid into the booth across from me, his face a mask of concern. He didn't waste time with hellos. Ben, are you all right? You look terrible. They're stealing from her, George, I said, my voice flat. His face didn't change, but his eyes hardened. Who, Leo? I just nodded. I laid it all out. The $5 mug, being banned from the gala, being called frail, Maya's discovery of the $500,000 transfer, the Aspen Lodge, and finally, the last straw. I went to my office today. I said I tried to look at the books. George, he locked me out. My son locked me out of my own company. He disabled my founder-level access. He reclassified me as an external vendor. George leaned back, his fingers drumming a silent, angry rhythm on the table. He was quiet for a long time. Ben, he said finally, his voice low and furious. "I'm glad you called. I've been worried. For the last year, even before I retired." "You knew. Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't know," he said. "I just had a feeling." It was his questions. He was always asking about the firewalls, the ones we put between the corporate accounts and the Isabella Fund. He kept asking if they were necessary, if they were antiquated. He wanted to know how to move assets more creatively. George looked me dead in the eye. He wasn't asking how to protect the fund, Ben. He was asking how to crack it. He called it synergy. I whispered the word, tasting like poison. "He called it accounting loopholes with me," George shot back. I told him in my exit interview, "Leo, don't you ever touch that fund. It's a firewall. It's sacred." He just smiled at me. That damned politician's smile. He told me I was old-fashioned. "He needs to be stopped, George, before he burns the whole thing to the ground." "What do you need?" George asked. No hesitation. This was it. "I need a ghost," I said. "I need someone to go into that system, someone Leo doesn't know is there. I need you to do one last audit for me." "It's not an audit, Ben. What you're asking for is a forensic investigation." "Then that's what I want," I said, leaning forward. "I want to know every single dollar that has moved out of the Isabella Fund since the day my wife died. Every transfer, every vendor, every marketing expense. I want to see where that $500,000 transfer went. I want to find the money for that Aspen Lodge. I want everything." George stared out the window at the perfect green, his mind already working. "He's gotten arrogant," George said quietly. "He locked you out. He thinks because I'm retired, I'm gone. He thinks because he hired a new IT team, the system is his." He turned back to me, and for the first time I saw a cold, dangerous smile on his face. "He's a fool," George said. "He forgot who built that system. He forgot who wrote the original code. He forgot who installed the audit trails that he doesn't even know exist." He stood up, pulling his wallet out to pay for the coffee I hadn't touched. "Don't worry, Ben. He disabled your front door key. But I'm the architect." He tapped his temple. "I always kept a key to the back door." George left the clubhouse, his face set with a grim determination. I watched him go, feeling the first spark of hope I'd felt in days. George was methodical. He was a bulldog. He would find the truth. But I knew it would take time. A forensic audit isn't a quick search. It involves digging through layers of digital records, following money trails across firewalls, and reconstructing a puzzle. It would take days, maybe a week. I drove back to my small condo, the silence pressing in on me. I couldn't just sit here and wait. I couldn't pace my living room, drowning in my own anger and suspicion. I felt like I was losing my mind, second-guessing every memory of my son. I needed to do something. I needed to see for myself. George was digging into the numbers, the cold, hard data. But that was only half the story. A company isn't just a balance sheet. It's people. It's a culture. It's a soul. I thought about Isabella. I thought about her constantly, but this was different. I thought about her business philosophy. I was the numbers guy, the strategist, the builder. But she was the heart. I remember standing in the kitchen of the diner, sweating, stressed about a supplier shorting us on beef. I was yelling about margins. Isabella calmly walked over, put her hand on my arm, and waited for me to stop. "Ben," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's not just about the food. Anyone can grill a steak." She pointed out to the dining room to a regular customer, Mr. Henderson, eating alone at the counter. "It's about him," she said. "It's about how we make him feel. He's a widower, Ben. This is the only place he talks to people all day. We are not just feeding him, we are welcoming him." She treated every employee like family. She knew the names of their children, their anniversaries. When our head waitress, Maria, needed surgery, Isabella didn't just cover her shifts. She paid the hospital bills directly out of our personal savings long before the fund even existed. "A restaurant," she always said, is just a room with food. It's the people that make it a home. I wondered, had any of that survived? Had Leo, in his rush to build an empire, preserved the soul, or had he just built a cold, hollow machine designed to print money? I knew where I had to go, the flagship. The Reed's Steakhouse and Grill on the main downtown plaza. It was our crown jewel, the one Isabella herself had designed. It was the most successful, the most profitable. It was also the one that held the most of her memory. Her bronze statue, the one the employees chipped in to buy for her 50th birthday, still stood in the lobby. I wasn't going to go as Benjamin Reed, the founder. I had seen how they reacted to him with fake smiles and calculated answers. No. I would go as the man they thought I had become. The man Amelia saw at the party. The man Leo had dismissed. I would go as a nobody. I went to my closet. I pushed past the few remaining suits I owned, the ones I wore to funerals. I reached into the back to the clothes I wore when I volunteered at the soup kitchen. I pulled them out. A pair of old faded khaki pants with a small paint stain on the knee. A gray wool sweater, clean but worn thin at the elbows. I put them on. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was not the titan of industry. He was not the man who built an empire. He was just an old man. 70 years old, with sad eyes and a tired face. I put on my old worn baseball cap, pulling the brim low. I wanted to see how Leo's new, modern company treated a confused, frail old man. I wanted to see exactly what they did when a man who looked like he didn't matter walked through their glittering front doors. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the flagship restaurant, and the change in atmosphere hit me like a physical blow. The diner, my firstborn, was warm, noisy, and smelled of coffee and shared history. This place was a cathedral of glass and steel. It was magnificent, I couldn't deny that. Leo had spent a fortune. The floors were polished black marble that echoed every footstep. The ceilings were 2 stories high, dripping with elaborate chandeliers that looked like frozen explosions. Expensive abstract art hung on walls of dark mahogany. It was beautiful, and it was cold as a tomb. It was the perfect representation of my son's ambition. All style, no soul. I walked past the enormous refrigerated wall of aging beef, past the glowing 3-story wine tower. I walked toward the lobby, my old rubber-soled shoes squeaking shamefully on the polished floor. And there she was. Isabella. Leo, for all his changes, hadn't dared to move her. The employees, the original employees, had chipped in for this statue for her 50th birthday years ago. It was life-sized bronze, and it was perfect. It wasn't a stuffy formal bust. It was her. She was captured in mid-laugh, her head thrown back, one hand holding a steak knife, and the other balancing a tray with a perfectly cooked ribeye and a glass of red wine, the way she always did when she'd test a new dish. The plaque on the granite base didn't say founder or CEO. It just said Isabella Reed, the heart of the house. I stood in front of it for a long moment, the noise of the restaurant fading away. I could almost hear her voice. Ben, stop fussing with the numbers and taste this. I reached out my hand, my old calloused fingers tracing the cold metal of her forearm. I miss you, Izzy. I whispered, my throat tight. I miss you so much. You wouldn't believe what they're doing. Can I help you, sir? The voice was sharp, cold, and laced with impatience. It sliced right through the moment. I turned. A young woman in a severe, expensive-looking black suit was standing at a high-tech hostess stand. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked like it hurt. Her makeup was perfect, a mask of professional indifference. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her eyes, that was the part that got me. Her eyes weren't looking at my face. They were doing a rapid, dismissive scan of my body. Down from my worn baseball cap, to my faded wool sweater, to my old khaki pants, and finally, to my comfortable, non-slip shoes. In 2 seconds, she had calculated my net worth and found it lacking. Sir, she repeated, as if I were deaf, not just old. Yes, I said, clearing my throat, pulling my cap off. I was just looking at the statue. Do you have a reservation? She asked. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. A password to a club I clearly didn't belong to. Her tone implied that the very idea of me having a reservation was absurd. No, I don't, I said. I was just hoping for a quiet table for one, perhaps in the corner. I won't be long. She actually let out a small, sharp laugh. A puff of air through her nostrils. She didn't even bother to look at the glowing tablet in front of her. Sir, we are fully committed, she said, stressing the word fully. We're booked out for the next 3 weeks. I glanced past her into the vast, gleaming dining room. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. The dinner rush hadn't started. I could see dozens of empty tables all perfectly set with white linens and shining silverware. It looks fairly empty, I said, pointing. I see 5, 6 tables right there by the window. Her polite mask froze, cracking into visible annoyance. She leaned forward. Sir, she said, her voice dropping to a low, condescending hiss. Those tables are reserved for our actual guests, people who planned ahead. The implication hung in the air. People unlike you. She stared at me, waiting for me to take my old poor self out of her beautiful, expensive lobby. I just stood there. I wasn't angry yet. I was just sad. This was what my company had become. A place that judged a man by his sweater, not his character. My silence seemed to infuriate her. She let out an exasperated sigh, a sound of supreme impatience, and snatched up a stack of heavy menus. Look, she said, turning her back to me, already dismissing me. If you must, you can wait at the bar. But you will have to order something. You can't just loiter. I did as I was told. I walked away from her polished stand, my hat in my hands, and moved toward the bar area. It was loud, packed with young men in slick, dark suits already drinking colorful cocktails at 5:30 in the afternoon. They were laughing, shouting about stocks and weekend plans, their voices sharp and arrogant. I found the only empty table. Of course, it was the worst table in the house. A tiny, wobbly two-top pushed into a dark corner right next to the swinging metal door that led to the kitchen. Clack swoosh, clack swoosh. The sound of the door and the clatter of dishes was constant. This is where they put the deliveries. This is where they put the trash. This is where they put me. I sat down on the hard, small wooden chair, feeling the vibration of the kitchen through the wall. A young waiter balancing a high tray of colorful martinis rushed past me. Excuse me, I said, my voice quiet. Son, could I just... He didn't even break stride. He looked right through me, his eyes focused on his important destination, as if I were a coat rack, a piece of furniture, a ghost. I waited. I've been a patient man my whole life. I built my company on patience. I waited 5 minutes, 10. I watched as the bartender, a man with a theatrical handlebar mustache, theatrically shook a cocktail mixer and presented it to a young woman at the bar who giggled. I watched the young hostess laugh and flirt with a guest who was clearly her age. I felt completely, utterly invisible. Another waitress passed this one looking stressed, her arms full of empty plates. I lifted my hand, just a small, polite gesture. Ma'am, I was just wondering if I could get a cup of coffee, please. She gave a sharp, annoyed huff, a yes that sounded like no, and immediately turned her full attention to a table of 4 men who had just sat down. They were loud, wearing watches that cost more than my car. I watched her smile brighten for them and becoming a beacon of warmth and hospitality. Good evening, gentlemen. Her voice was suddenly musical. Can I start you all off with a bottle of our reserve Cabernet, or perhaps some champagne to celebrate the evening? My coffee, of course, never came. This was the culture Leo had built. Efficient, cold, and transactional. A culture that measured a person's worth by the brand of their watch or the cut of their suit. I closed my eyes, the constant clack swoosh of the kitchen door fading into the background. I remembered the diner. I remembered the winter of 1985. It was a Tuesday, pouring rain, the kind of cold, miserable day that sinks deep into your bones. The bell above our diner door jingled and two men walked in, stamping water and mud onto the welcome mat. One was Mr. Davenport, the president of the First National Bank, in a $1,000 wool suit, now soaked and dripping. The other was Big Jim O'Malley, the foreman for the construction crew building the new bank tower. Jim was covered head to toe in mud and concrete dust. They looked at each other, gave a short nod, and sat 2 stools apart at the counter. Isabella, my Isabella, was working the counter herself that day. She didn't miss a beat. She poured 2 heavy mugs of coffee. She slid one to the banker. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice full of genuine warmth, "you look half frozen. You're having the beef stew, and I'm putting extra bread with it." He just nodded, grateful, cupping his hands around the hot mug. Then she slid the other cup to the foreman. "Jim," she said just as warmly, "that cough sounds worse than last week. I'm putting a shot of honey in this for you, and you're having the stew too. No arguments." She didn't see a suit and a set of overalls. She saw 2 cold, wet, hungry men. She knew their names. She knew their stories. She treated the banker and the builder with the exact same respect, the exact same care. That was the Reed way. That was the company I built. That was the soul I had passed on to my son, or so I thought. I was pulled from that warm memory by a sudden shift in the room's energy. The hostess, the one who had dismissed me, suddenly stood up straight, her bored expression vanishing, replaced by a smile so bright it looked painful. The bar staff seemed to snap to attention, their backs rigid. The heavy glass front doors swung open with a dramatic whoosh of cold city air. And there he was, my son, Leo. He looked like a king. He was wearing a dark, custom-tailored suit that probably cost $10,000. His hair was perfectly styled, not a single gray strand visible. His shoes shone like black mirrors. Beside him, dripping in diamonds that caught the light of the chandeliers, was Amelia. She was laughing, her head tilted back, clinging to his arm. They were not alone. Following them were 2 older men, silver-haired, in equally expensive suits. They had the unmistakable quiet look of serious money investors, bankers, the kind of men Leo was desperate to impress. "Mr. Reed," the hostess gushed, her voice high and breathless. She practically bowed. "Your table is ready, of course. Right this way." Leo didn't even look at her. He just gave a curt, dismissive nod, scanning his room with a look of supreme ownership. He was starting to walk toward the main dining area when Amelia, turning to follow, saw me. Her eyes scanned the bar, passed right over me, and then snapped back. Her smile froze. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth dropped open. She stopped dead in her tracks right in the middle of the marble lobby. Her eyes locked onto mine across the crowded bar. The smile on Amelia's face didn't just fade, it shattered. It was like watching a beautiful, expensive vase drop onto a marble floor. Her face went through 3 distinct, rapid emotions. First, pure, unadulterated shock. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open. Second, a flash of absolute cold panic. Her eyes widened, darting quickly to the important-looking men her husband was schmoozing, checking if they had noticed. Third, and this was the one that truly broke my heart, a wave of dark, venomous, reptilian anger. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Her skin, moments before glowing with champagne, turned a blotchy, furious red. She had been caught off guard, and she was furious about it. Leo, his back to me, was still laughing, gesturing expansively to his guests. "And as I was saying, the new growth projection is—" "Leo," Amelia hissed, her voice like a knife. She grabbed his custom-suited arm, her nails digging in. "What?" he said, annoyed at the interruption. "Amelia, Look," she breathed, her head jerking toward my dark corner. Leo turned. He followed her gaze. He squinted into the dim light of the bar. He saw me sitting at the wobbly trash table in my old sweater and baseball cap. He froze. In that single stretched-out second, The entire noisy, boisterous restaurant went silent. It didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once, as if a switch had been thrown. The chatter at the bar stopped mid-laugh. The clinking of silverware on plates ceased. Even the clack swoosh of the kitchen door paused. Everyone, the waiters, the bartenders, the hostess, the young men in suits, the wealthy diners at their tables, everyone turned. They turned to look at the center of this sudden, terrible drama. They saw their powerful, charismatic COO Leo Reed and his beautiful wife Amelia frozen in the lobby. And they saw the object of their horror. Me. A confused-looking old man in a cheap sweater looking like he had wandered in off the street. The humiliation was a physical thing. It was hot and it covered my skin. I felt 1,000 eyes on me judging me, agreeing with the hostess's earlier assessment. He doesn't belong here. Leo, ever the politician, was the first to recover. He saw his audience. He plastered on a pained, apologetic smile for his guests. Gentlemen, please. Excuse me for just one moment. A small family matter. He patted one of the men on the arm. Please head to the table. I'll be right with you. The men nodded, confused, and followed the terrified hostess. Amelia did not move. She just stood there, her arms crossed, vibrating with a rage so pure it was almost visible. Leo turned and walked toward me. He didn't rush. He walked with a slow, deliberate, heavy tread. It was the walk I used to use when I had to fire someone. With every step he took, his face got darker. The politician's mask melted away, revealing the angry, entitled man underneath. He didn't stop in front of my table. He walked right up to it, invading my space, forcing me to look up at him. He leaned down, placing both his hands on my small, wobbly table. He didn't speak in a normal voice. He hissed, his voice low and sharp, meant only for me, but vibrating with fury. "What?" he spat. "Do you think you are doing?" I just looked at him. My son. My boy. I just wanted a cup of coffee, Leo. "A cup of coffee?" he hissed. "Here now." "Are you insane? You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing Amelia. You look like a homeless person." That word. Homeless. He said it with such contempt, such disgust, as if I were something he had scraped off his $10,000 shoe. The pain was so sharp, so sudden, I almost couldn't breathe. This was the boy I had carried on my shoulders. This was the man I had given my entire life's work to. I felt my own sadness, my own grief suddenly burn away, replaced by that same cold, hard clarity I'd felt in my office. I met his gaze. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly, clearly. "This is my restaurant, Leo." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. For a second, he looked taken aback. He hadn't expected me to talk back. He expected me to cower. But Amelia, who had stalked over behind him, heard me. And she exploded. "This is not your restaurant!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing through the silent watching room. She threw her small diamond-encrusted purse onto a nearby chair. "This is our restaurant. You're retired, remember. You are a guest here, and you are scaring our real guests." She looked wildly around, her eyes landing on the young waiter who had ignored me earlier. He was standing frozen by the service station holding a water pitcher. "You?" she snapped at him. The boy flinched as if she had slapped him. "Yes, Mrs. Reed. I want to speak to the manager right now." "But ma'am, Now," Amelia screamed. "Go get him." The boy practically ran, disappearing toward the back offices. Leo looked furious at Amelia for losing her composure, for making the scene so much bigger. He was trying to do this quietly. She had just turned on all the lights. "Amelia, calm down," he hissed at her. "I will not calm down, Leo," she fired back. "I will not have him ruin the most important night of your career. I will not have this vagrant." She pointed at me, her finger trembling, her face a mask of pure, unfiltered hatred. The manager, a new man I didn't recognize, came rushing out of the back. his tie askew, his face pale with panic. "Mr. Reed, Mrs. Reed, what is happening? Is everything all right?" Amelia rounded on him. "Is everything all right?" "No, nothing is all right," she shouted, pointing that trembling finger directly at my face. "There is an old man here. He is harassing us. He is harassing my husband. I want you to call security. I want you to get him out of here." The manager, a young man named David, came rushing over. His suit was expensive, his hair was perfectly gelled, and his face was a mask of professional panic. He was one of Leo's hires, I could tell. He had that slick corporate look, not the warm, worn-in look of my original team. He rushed straight to Leo, not even glancing at me. "Mr. Reed, Mrs. Reed, I am so sorry," he said, his voice breathy and high. "What seems to be the problem? How can I help you?" He was looking at Leo and Amelia as his saviors, his bosses. I was just the problem, a piece of trash to be swept up before it stained the marble. Amelia, her voice now triumphant, righteous, and dripping with venom, jabbed her finger at my chest. The diamond on her hand flashed, catching the light, a tiny hard star of cruelty. "Him," she declared, her voice echoing in the now silent dining room. "That is the problem. He wandered in from the street. He is harassing my husband and me, and he is frankly disgusting. I want him gone. Now. Call security and have him removed." The manager, David, nodded quickly, eager to please. "Of course, Mrs. Reed, right away. I am so sorry you had to experience this." He turned to me. His face was already set in that hard, impersonal mask of an enforcer, the look people use when they are about to do something unpleasant to someone they deem beneath them. He was about to do it. He was about to deliver the final humiliation. "Sir," he started, his voice firm, "I must ask you to—" But the words died in his throat. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes, which had been skimming over me, suddenly focused. He was really looking at me for the first time. His mouth, which had been a tight, firm line, went slightly slack. I could see the gears turning, grinding in his head. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a sudden, violent, dawning confusion. "Where have I seen this old man before?" His gaze darted frantically past me across the lobby to the one thing in the room that was sacred, to the bronze life-sized statue of Isabella, the heart of the house. He stared at the statue for a long, frozen second, at her laughing face, her warm, kind eyes. Then his eyes snapped back to me. I could see him tracing my features in his mind. My eyes, the line of my jaw, the shape of my nose. He was comparing me to the man in the photographs they all had to memorize during their corporate orientation. The black and white photos that hung in the employee break room and the executive hallways. The photos of a young, dark-haired, vital man standing next to that same laughing woman, his arm around her in front of a tiny diner 50 years ago. He looked at me and he finally understood. He was not looking at a vagrant. He was not looking at a homeless man. He was looking at Benjamin Reed, the founder, the owner, the man whose name was on the building. The color did not drain from his face. It evaporated. It was as if someone had pulled a plug beneath his skin. He went from a healthy, stressed-out pink to a grayish, sickly chalk white in less than a second. A fine mist of sweat popped onto his upper lip. His professional smile didn't fade. It collapsed, replaced by an expression of pure, abject, job-ending terror. He knew. In that instant, he knew he was trapped. His direct boss, the powerful COO Leo Reed, had given him a direct public order: get him out. But his other boss, the legacy, the founder, the man who was Reed's steakhouse, was the one he was about to physically remove. He was holding a grenade, and the pin was gone. He swallowed. I could see his Adam's apple bob nervously in his throat. He opened his mouth. A small, dry, clicking sound came out. He closed it. He looked at Leo. He looked at me. He looked at the statue of Isabella, as if praying for her to save him. And then he made his choice. He did not speak to me. Not yet. He turned slowly, his movements robotic, to face his boss. He turned to face my son. Mr. Reed. David stammered, his voice cracking barely a whisper in the dead, heavy silence of the restaurant. Leo, furious at the delay at this public display of incompetence, snapped back. What is it, David? Don't just stand there, man. Call security. Get him out of my sight. David visibly flinched as if Leo had struck him. He took a small, involuntary step backward, away from Leo and Amelia. And then, in the absolute pin-drop silence of the room, he did the bravest and most desperate thing of his young career. He slowly, respectfully turned his head. He turned to me. He was trembling so badly he could barely form the words. He addressed me not as a vagrant, but as the king. Sir, Mr. Reed, sir, he stammered, his eyes wide with panic. How would you like us to handle these guests? The question hung in the air. It was a bomb. The silence that followed was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air, all the sound, all the life out of that $40,000 room. The hostess's hand flew to her mouth, her gasp muffled. The bartenders froze, shakers and bottles in midair. I saw the two important-looking guests at Leo's table stop their forks halfway to their mouths, staring their faces, a mask of confusion. Amelia didn't understand. She hadn't processed it. What did you just say? She whispered. Her face twisted in disbelief. Are you stupid? I meant him. Throw him out. But Leo understood. He understood instantly. He understood that the manager, his manager, had recognized me. He understood that the manager had just chosen a side. He understood that the game was over. I watched my son's face. The arrogant, dismissive mask, the anger, the confidence. It all dissolved. I watched the blood drain from his face, leaving him as pale as the manager. He looked at me, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open, seeing me for the first time all night, seeing not the frail old man but his father, the founder, the one person he thought he had successfully neutralized. He had been caught. At that exact second, that precise, perfect moment of terrible, beautiful silence, I felt a vibration in my pocket, a single powerful buzz. It felt as loud as a gunshot in the quiet room. I didn't break eye contact with my son. His eyes were locked on mine, filled with a new, horrifying realization. I reached slowly, deliberately into the pocket of my old stained khaki pants. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright. A new email notification sat on the lock screen. I didn't even have to open it. The subject line said everything. From George Tanaka. Subject: audit complete. Urgent. My son's face was a mask of pure, realized horror. He understood what the manager's question meant. He understood that the power in the room had just shifted violently and completely. Amelia, still failing to grasp the change, stammered, What? What did you just say? Handle us. The manager, David, looked only at me, trembling, awaiting my verdict. Leo's eyes were locked on mine. They were pleading, begging me silently not to do this, not in public. And in that perfect, terrible, stretched-out moment of silence, the phone in my pocket buzzed again. Hard. I didn't break eye contact with my son. I let the silence hang for 5 full seconds. I let him understand what it felt like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone else's decision. Then slowly, I reached into the pocket of my old worn khakis. I pulled out the phone. The bright screen lit up my hand. The notification was there. A new email. From George Tanaka. Subject: audit complete. Urgent. Leo saw the name. I watched his eyes track the name George Tanaka on the screen. He knew that name. He knew George was my man. The last traces of color drained from his face. He knew what this was. Dad, he whispered, his voice cracking, the arrogance gone, replaced by the terrified sound of a little boy. "Dad, don't. Please, we can talk about this." "We're done talking, Leo," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the dead silent room. I tapped the email. I opened it. Right there, standing in the middle of my restaurant, surrounded by my silent watching employees and my son's horrified investors. I read. My hands were perfectly steady. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I skimmed George's executive summary. It was worse. It was so much worse than I had imagined. I had been worried about $500,000. I was a fool. The $500,000 that Maya had caught was just the most recent transaction. It was the last drop in a bucket that was already overflowing. George's report laid it all out. The theft had started 3 years ago, the very month I handed Leo the keys to the company. It was systematic. It was cold. It was predatory. George had found the shell companies, 4 of them. AR Consulting, Aspen Holdings LLC, Brand Partners International, Reed Family Logistics. All 4, George noted, were registered to P.O. boxes in Delaware. All 4 listed their managing partners as Amelia's father and Amelia's brother. My son hadn't just dipped into the fund. He had built a sophisticated pipeline to drain it. I scrolled down. The report detailed the fake contracts, dozens of them. Contracts against his mother's sacred fund for gala consulting services, for donor brand management, for strategic outreach. All lies. All invoices for work that was never done, services never rendered. And Leo, my son, had approved every single one, pushing them through the new compliant board he had installed. I kept scrolling, my thumb steady, my heart like a stone in my chest. I was looking for the final number, the total. George had put it in bold. Total funds diverted from the Isabella Reed Charity Fund to the 4 shell corporations over 36 months, $3,245,800. They had stolen over $3 million. And then I saw the attachments. George hadn't just found the totals. He had followed the money out. I tapped the file labeled Aspen Transaction. There it was. A wire transfer confirmation. $1.5 million. Sent from Aspen Holdings LLC to an escrow company in Pitkin County, Colorado. The memo line, down payment, 455 Snowmass Drive. The house. The house Amelia had bragged about on social media. Bought with his mother's money. I opened the next file. Casino debts. Scans of cashier's checks. $100,000. Paid from Brand Partners International directly to the Bellagio in Las Vegas to cover a gambling marker for Amelia's brother. And the last one. Auto purchase. A receipt from a Bentley dealership in Chicago, paid in full. Reed Family Logistics. Amelia's new car. They hadn't just stolen it. They had spent it. They had taken the money meant for the families of sick cooks, the money meant for the children of waitresses who had lost their homes, and they had turned it into a ski lodge, poker chips, and a luxury car. I finally understood. They didn't ban me from the gala because I was frail. They banned me because the gala was when the annual report for the fund was presented. They banned me because I was the only person alive who would look at the numbers and know instantly that they were a lie. They hadn't just disrespected my wife. They had spit on her grave. I slowly looked up from the phone. The entire restaurant was still frozen, watching me. Amelia was clutching Leo's arm, whispering frantically, "What is it, Leo? What is it? Tell him to stop. Make him stop." Leo was paralyzed. He just stared at me, his mouth open, his breathing shallow. He knew. My grief was gone. My sadness was gone. All that was left was the ice. I looked past my son, past his terrified wife. I looked at the manager, David, who was still standing there, trembling. David, I said. Yes, yes, Mr. Reed. You asked me how I wanted to handle these, guests. I took a step toward my son. I held up the phone so he could see the screen, see the totals, see the name of the casino. Leo, I said. My voice quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. Amelia. I let the words hang in the air for one final terrible beat. You're both under arrest. Leo's face crumpled. The arrogance, the confidence, the power, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by the slack-jawed primal terror of a man who just saw the executioner enter the room. Dad. What are you talking about? He stammered. His voice was thin, unrecognizable. You can't be serious. This is just... It's a misunderstanding. I looked at him, my heart cold. A misunderstanding. I held up the phone, the screen still glowing with the total from George's audit. Is $3.2 million a misunderstanding, Leo? Is the house in Aspen a misunderstanding? Is the money you used to pay your brother-in-law's casino debts a misunderstanding? Amelia let out a sound, a high-pitched, strangled noise like a dying animal. He told me that money was from a bonus, a private investment. The only private investment he made, I said, was with his mother's sacred charity. I turned my gaze from my son, who was now visibly shaking, to the terrified manager David. The young man was still frozen, his eyes wide, looking between me and the man who 5 minutes ago had been his boss. My voice was clear, sharp, and left no room for negotiation. It was the voice I used to build my company. David? Yes, Mr. Reed. Call security. Right now. I want Mr. Leo Reed and Mrs. Amelia Reed escorted from this property. Immediately. Revoke their corporate key card access before they leave the building. Leo lunged forward, his hands out. Dad, no. You can't. You don't have the authority. Amelia shrieked, finding her voice. It was pure, unfiltered rage. You can't do this, you senile old fool. You don't have the authority. Leo runs this company. You're nothing. I'm nothing, I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. I held up my phone. We'll see about that. I didn't call 911. I called George. The phone rang once. He picked up instantly. George! I said, my voice booming in the silent restaurant. I hit the speakerphone button. I'm here, Ben. George's voice, steady and calm, filled the air. Is it done? It's done, I said. Leo, Amelia. They're right here. They seem to be under the impression that Leo is still in charge of this company. Can you clarify the situation for him? There was a pause. I watched Leo's face. He knew what was coming. Mr. Leo Reed, George's voice was like steel. As of approximately 45 minutes ago, your executive access to all Reed Enterprises' financial accounts, servers, and security protocols has been permanently revoked. You are locked out, son, completely. Amelia looked at Leo, her face pale. What is he talking about? Leo, tell them. Leo couldn't speak. He just stared at my phone, defeated. I continued, still on speakerphone. George, thank you. Now I have a few more instructions. I want you to execute them immediately. Are you ready? Ready, Ben. First, I want you to call Kate Walsh, our lawyer. I want her to convene an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Subject: the immediate and hostile termination of the Chief Operating Officer for cause. Done, George said. Leo made a gasping sound. Dad, please. I held up my hand, silencing him. I wasn't finished. Second, George, I want Kate to immediately file a civil suit against Leo Reed, Amelia Reed, and all 4 of their shell corporations. I want to sue them for the full amount, $3.2 million plus damages. I want a lien placed on all their known assets, the house, the cars, the Aspen Lodge, everything. Amelia let out a scream, a real guttural scream of loss. The house, you can't take our house. You bought it with stolen money, dear, I said. It was never yours. And George? I said, saving the final blow. One last thing. Yes, Ben. Take the entire audit you just sent me. Every single fake invoice, every illegal wire transfer, every bank statement from those shell companies. And I want you to personally deliver a copy of it to the district attorney's office, first thing in the morning. That was it. The final nail. Amelia's knees buckled. She didn't just collapse. She crumpled, falling into a heap on the marble floor, sobbing hysterically. No. That's family money. It's family money. I turned off the speakerphone. I looked down at her, a pathetic, weeping mess on the floor of my restaurant. My voice was low, and it was shaking, not with fear, but with a grief so profound it had turned to iron. It was not, I growled, family money. I pointed to the bronze statue of my wife, her face still laughing, forever kind. It was her money. It was money for widows. It was money for orphans. It was money for sick children. And you too, you thieves, you stole it right off your mother's grave. Just then, 2 uniformed security guards came running into the lobby, summoned by David. They saw the scene. The COO's wife sobbing on the floor. The COO, my son, standing white-faced and paralyzed. And me, the old man in the worn sweater, holding a phone like a weapon. They looked at the manager, David, for guidance. David, his face still pale but his voice firm, pointed at Leo and Amelia. Escort them out. Mr. Benjamin Reed's orders. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the main boardroom on the executive floor. I wasn't wearing my old volunteer clothes. I was wearing my armor. My best dark blue custom-tailored suit. The one I hadn't worn since Isabella's funeral. The room was silent, the air thick and toxic. On one side of the long, polished mahogany table sat my team. Kate Walsh, our corporate counsel. A sharp, brilliant woman in her 50s sat with 3 thick-bound copies of George's audit stacked neatly in front of her. George Tanaka sat beside her, his face like granite. And beside him, my daughter Maya. She was pale, her eyes red from a night of crying, but she was here. She was present. She met my gaze and nodded a look of sad, steely resolve. On the other side of the table sat the enemy. Leo was unrecognizable. The polished, arrogant king from the restaurant was gone. In his place was a haggard, broken man. He hadn't shaved. His expensive suit was wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. His eyes were bloodshot, empty, and fixed on the polished wood grain of the table in front of him. Beside him sat Amelia. She was wearing massive dark sunglasses even indoors, trying to hide the fact that her eyes were swollen shut. Her hair was a mess. She was visibly trembling, clutching a bottle of Evian water with shaking hands. And next to them was their lawyer, a high-priced downtown shark named Marcus Allen, who looked like he hadn't slept either. He was shuffling papers, his face grim. He knew he wasn't here to win. He was here to manage a surrender. The 2 other independent directors, Mr. Chen and Mrs. Davis, were patched in via the large video screen at the end of the room. Their faces were grim. They had been sent the audit summary last night. I walked to the head of the table, the chair that had been mine for 40 years. I didn't sit. I just stood there looking down the length of the table at my son. Good morning, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I believe we all know why we are here. Kate, if you would. Kate Walsh stood up. She was all business. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Good morning, members of the board. She didn't waste a single moment on pleasantries. She was merciless. For 20 minutes, she walked them and us through the nightmare in cold, hard legal terms. Pursuant to the emergency summons, Kate began, her voice clear and cutting. We are here to review the findings of a forensic audit conducted by Mr. George Tanaka regarding the Isabella Reed Charity Fund. She gestured to the 3 thick bound copies of the audit. I believe you've all seen the summary. Now let's look at the specifics. Kate Walsh stood up. She didn't waste time with details the board had already seen in the summary. She put a single slide on the screen, the total stolen amount, and the forged signatures. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The forensic audit is conclusive. $3.2 million stolen. 36 forged signatures, all traced directly to shell companies owned by Amelia's family. This is not accounting error. This is grand larceny. She looked directly at Leo. And it was authorized by one person, Mr. Leo Reed. Kate Walsh sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. The video screens of the 2 other directors were just faces frozen in shock and disgust. I looked at my son. I gave him the floor. Leo, do you have anything to say for yourself? Leo couldn't speak. He just stared. His lawyer, Mr. Allen, stood up, clearing his throat, adjusting his tie. He had the impossible job of defending the indefensible. Mr. Reed, he began, his voice trying for reasonable, but landing on desperate. Members of the board, what we have here, it is not as clear-cut as Ms. Walsh presents. He was already sweating. This is not a criminal act per se. What we have is a complex misunderstanding of aggressive financial management. A misunderstanding. He actually used the word. I felt Maya tense beside me. My client, Mr. Leo Reed, Allen continued, waving his hands, was acting under the full belief that he was reinvesting the fund's capital. He was using these external consulting firms as vehicles to generate new, more dynamic revenue streams, to elevate the Reed brand, which in turn benefits the fund. He was trying to paint my son as a maverick, an innovator, not a common thief. This Aspen property was not a personal purchase, Allen said, pushing his luck. It was intended as a high-end corporate retreat, a place to woo high-net-worth donors. The vehicle purchase, a necessary expense for transporting those donors. It was all synergy. That word, that poison, arrogant word that had started this whole thing. As for the signatures, Allen said Mr. Leo Reed has had signature authority delegated from his father for years. Perhaps he was overzealous in its application, but it was not forgery. It was assumption of authority in his father's best interest. Assumption, I repeated, my voice ice. My son assumed he could steal. Before I could say another word, George Tanaka, who had been silent this whole time, slammed his hand flat on the table. Bam! The sound made Amelia physically jump, and Leo snapped his head up, his eyes wide. George, my quiet, patient, reserved accountant, was shaking with pure, righteous fury. Do not, George said, his voice low and trembling, insult our intelligence. He stood up slowly, pointing a shaking finger at Leo. I am the man who wrote the bylaws for that fund with Isabella Reed herself. You call paying your brother-in-law's gambling debts in Las Vegas brand synergy. He pointed at Amelia. You call buying a $250,000 Bentley for your wife donor transport. He turned to the lawyer. And you call forging this man's signature, the man who founded this company, an assumption. You are a disgrace to your profession. George was breathing heavily. He looked back at Leo. I'm not a lawyer, Mr. Allen. I'm just a bean counter. But I know what this is. This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't reinvesting. George's voice dropped to a cold whisper that was louder than a shout. This is theft. This is fraud. This is embezzlement. And you know it. George sat back down. His words hung in the air, undeniable. Leo's lawyer, checkmated quietly, sat down. He had nothing left. I stood up, stepping to the head of the table. I looked at the shocked faces of the other directors on the video screens. I looked at Maya, who was crying silently, tears of pain and vindication. I looked at George, who had defended my honor and my wife's. And then I looked at my son. He was broken. A shell. You have heard the audit. I said, my voice now the only sound. The evidence is absolute. There is no misunderstanding. There is only a deep, calculated, and malicious betrayal of this company, this family, and the memory of Isabella Reed. Leo looked up at me, his eyes finally meeting mine. Dad, he whispered. I ignored him. My heart was a block of granite. I, Benjamin Reed, founder and chairman of the board, do hereby make a motion. I paused, letting the formal cold words land. I move that Leo Reed be terminated as Chief Operating Officer of Reed Enterprises for cause effective immediately. And I make a second motion that this board authorize our legal counsel, Ms. Walsh, to pursue every available civil and criminal action to recover the $3.2 million he stole, including the immediate seizure and sale of all assets purchased with the stolen funds. I looked at the directors. Do I have a second? Maya, her face streaked with tears, but her voice strong as steel, said, I second the motion. I looked at my son, a man I no longer knew. All in favor? Mr. Chen's face on the video screen was grim. Aye. Mrs. Davis, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line, said aye, without hesitation. George Tanaka, who had been sitting like a coiled spring, just said aye. Maya, my daughter, her face pale but resolute, looked across the table at her brother. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. I was the majority shareholder. My vote alone was enough. But their voices, their unanimous support, was the final heavy seal on my son's fate. I looked down the long table at Leo. The motion passes. I said, my voice echoing in the dead cold room. Unanimously. Leo just collapsed. It wasn't a physical fall. It was an internal one. He slid down in his expensive chair, his hands coming up to cover his face as a low, agonizing moan escaped his lips. Amelia, however, was frozen. Her sunglasses were still on a ridiculous dark mask in the fluorescent light of the boardroom. I could see her mouth pale and trembling. She had finally understood. The money was gone. The Aspen house. The Bentley. The entire life she had stolen, the life she had bragged about on social media, was evaporating in front of her. Their lawyer, Marcus Allen, saw it too. He was already discreetly sliding his laptop into his expensive leather briefcase. He had the distinct look of a man who was calculating how many billable hours he could get in before his client's accounts were seized. He knew this fight was over. All that was left was the criminal trial. Kate Walsh, ever the professional, did not pause to savor the moment. She immediately moved to the next item, her voice crisp and cold. The second part of the motion now passed is the authorization to report these findings to the relevant authorities. She looked directly at Mr. Allen. As we speak, a team is compiling this full audit, including the digital transfer records and the forgery analysis. Copies will be hand-delivered this afternoon to the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division and to the White Collar Crime Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Amelia's head snapped up. Her sunglasses almost fell off. F.B. She whispered, her voice horrified. Of course, Kate said, as if explaining something to a child. The Isabella Reed Fund has donors and operations in multiple states. Moving stolen funds across state lines constitutes federal wire fraud. And since the fund is a registered 501c3 charity, this also constitutes felony tax evasion. I believe the sentencing guidelines are severe. Kate then turned to Leo, who was still hiding behind his hands. Furthermore, as of this morning, my team has filed emergency civil liens with the appropriate courts in Colorado, Illinois, and Delaware to freeze and seize all assets traceable to the 4 shell corporations. She slid a piece of paper down the table. That includes the property at 455 Snowmass Drive, the 2024 Bentley Continental, and all known bank accounts associated with Amelia Reed, Paul Matthews, and David Matthews. That did it. The mention of her house, her Bentley, made Amelia let out a high, thin wail that sounded less human and more like a wounded animal. "No, no, you can't. That's my house. That's my car. You can't take them." Her shriek finally snapped Leo out of his self-pitying stupor. He shot up from his chair. The force of it sent the heavy leather chair flying backward, crashing into the wall-mounted credenza with a sickening thud. "No!" he roared. His face was a dark, blotchy purple. Veins stood out on his neck. He was a cornered animal, all pretense of the polished COO, gone, replaced by pure, desperate rage. He didn't look at Kate. He didn't look at the directors on the screen. He looked at me. He pointed a shaking finger across the expanse of polished mahogany, his eyes burning with a lifetime of resentment, entitlement, and now pure, undiluted hatred. "You!" he screamed, his voice cracking, spittle flying from his lips. "You did this, you. You couldn't just let me have it. You couldn't just retire and die. You had to interfere. You had to come and check." I said nothing. I just stood at the head of the table, my hands clasped behind my back. I let him burn himself out. "You destroyed me!" he shouted, tears of rage, not remorse, streaming down his unshaven face. "You ruined my life, my family, after everything I did for this company, after I doubled its value, you destroyed me." He pounded his fist on the table, a weak, fleshy sound that was pathetic in the large room. "I am your son," he bellowed, the words echoing off the glass. "I am your son, your own blood. How could you do this to me? How could you choose strangers over your own family?" His lawyer Alan was trying to pull him back, hissing, "Leo, stop! Leo, you're making it worse! Shut up!" But Leo was beyond reason. He shoved the lawyer away from him. The room was silent, waiting for my response. I waited until his screaming subsided into just ragged, ugly sobs. I took one step toward him. "I didn't choose strangers over you, Leo," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet, but it cut through his hysterics like a razor. "I chose her," I pointed. Not at Maya. Not at anyone in the room. I pointed out the massive boardroom window down toward the plaza below where I knew her statue stood watching even from here. "I chose your mother," I said. "I chose her legacy. I chose the families she wanted to protect. I chose the waitresses with sick children and the dishwashers who lost their homes, the very people you stole from, to buy your toys." I took another step. "You talk about blood, her sweat, her soul is in the foundation of this company. And you and that woman. You danced on her grave. You treated her memory like your personal bank account." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that I knew would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I didn't destroy you, Leo. You are not the victim here." I tapped the thick, bound audit report with my index finger. "You destroyed yourself. You did this. You made this choice every single day for 3 years. Every time you forged my signature. Every time you approved a fake invoice. Every time you lied to your sister. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided that a ski lodge in Aspen was more important than your mother's honor." I straightened up, my hands once again clasped behind my back. "You are not the son she raised. You are not the man I trusted. You are a common thief, and you will be treated as one." Leo just stared at me, his mouth open, no words left. He had nothing. The truth had finally completely silenced him. Amelia was still sobbing hysterically. "My house, my Bentley. He took my house." Her lawyer, Marcus Allen, knew the game was over. He grabbed Leo by the bicep hard. "It's over, Leo. We're done here. We are leaving." He grabbed Amelia by her arm, pulling her up from her chair. She was a dead weight, resisting. "Come on, Amelia, now." He began dragging them both toward the door. Leo didn't resist. He was hollowed out, a puppet whose strings had been cut. He just shuffled, his eyes still locked on me, his face a mask of utter blank disbelief. But Amelia, she found one last spark of venom. As they reached the heavy door, she ripped her arm free from the lawyer's grasp. She turned back to me, her face swollen and ugly, her sunglasses gone, her eyes puffy slits of pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Benjamin," she shrieked, her voice a raw, desperate howl. "You'll die alone, you miserable old man! You'll die all alone!" And then they were gone. The heavy boardroom door swung shut with a soft, expensive whoosh, leaving only a suffocating silence in its wake. The boardroom door clicked shut, leaving a vacuum. Maya was weeping silently into her hands. George Tanaka, my oldest friend, just sat there, his shoulders slumped, looking 100 years old. "It's done, Ben," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. I nodded. I felt nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. Kate Walsh, our lawyer, didn't wait. She gathered her papers with sharp, precise movements. The wheels of justice, once they finally start to turn, move with a terrible, impersonal speed. I didn't see the arrests happen. I didn't have to. I saw it the next morning the same way the rest of the world did. It was splashed across the front page of the Chicago Tribune above the fold. There was a picture. My son Leo in the expensive wrinkled suit he had worn to the boardroom, his face ashen, his hands cuffed behind his back, being led out of our headquarters. Beside him, Amelia, her face hidden by her hair, her hands cuffed in front of her. But it was the headline that felt like a physical blow. It was the line that would follow me for the rest of my life. Reed's empire in shambles. Founder Benjamin Reed exposes son for embezzling millions from deceased mother's charity fund. My name, my son's name, and Isabella's name, all dragged through the mud together. The phones started ringing at 6 a.m., and they did not stop. It was not a trickle. It was a deluge. Our partners, our lenders, the banks that held our multi-million-dollar lines of credit, our high-net-worth investors, the same men Leo had been trying to impress at the restaurant, were calling their voices a mix of panic and fury. "What kind of ship are you running, Ben?" one of them yelled at me through the phone. "Is our money safe? Are you compromised? Is the whole company rotten?" Our company was private, but its value was built on 40 years of my reputation. And that reputation was now toxic. But the real damage, the part that truly cut me to the bone, was what happened to the fund. The donors, the legitimate ones, the ones who had loved Isabella, the people who gave thousands of dollars every year because they believed in her mission. They were outraged. The phones at Maya's diner, which had become the de facto headquarters for the fund, were ringing off the hook. But they weren't calling to ask what happened. They were calling to pull their pledges. "We cannot be associated with this kind of scandal." One major foundation wrote in an email that Maya forwarded to me, her hands shaking. "Effective immediately, the Peterson Foundation is withdrawing all future support." We lost a decade of goodwill in 12 hours. The company was in freefall. We were hemorrhaging money, trust, and credibility. The board members on the video screens who had been so supportive during the meeting were now sending panicked emails. "Ben, we are facing a total systemic collapse. We need a strategy. Now." I stood in the silent boardroom, watching the panic unfold, the blinking red lights on the phone console, looking like warning lights on a sinking ship. And my mind went back. It went back to 2008. The great financial crisis. The world was ending. Our steakhouses were empty. Our credit lines were frozen overnight. Our suppliers were demanding cash, upfront cash that we did not have. We were 2 weeks from bankruptcy. I remembered standing in this very same room with Isabella. I was defeated. I told her, "Izzy, I think we're done. I have to file for bankruptcy." Isabella, my wife, my lioness, just looked at me. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicked. She walked over to the coat rack and picked up one of the old server aprons we kept there. "No, we're not," she said, tying it around her waist. You and I started this company with one diner and a grill. We will save it with one diner and a grill. We are not hiding. That night, I, the CEO, worked the grill line at the diner. Isabella, the founder, waited tables. We cut our own salaries to zero. We gathered all our employees right here in this room, and we laid the books bare on this table. We told them the truth. We are almost out of money, but we will not hide from you. We will work alongside you, and we will get through this. And then we did. We saved the company not with tricks, but with truth. I looked at Maya, who was watching me, her face pale. I saw Isabella's strength in her eyes. I knew what I had to do. Kate, I said to my lawyer, call a press conference. Book the biggest ballroom at the downtown Hilton. Invite everyone, the Tribune, the news stations, every financial blogger who is currently calling us thieves. I want them there in 2 hours. That afternoon, I stood in front of a wall of cameras. The flashing bulbs were blinding like a continuous, painful explosion. I didn't read from a script. I didn't have one. I spoke from the cold, hard, broken place in my heart. Good afternoon, I said, my voice carrying over the clicks of the cameras. My name is Benjamin Reed, and for 45 years I built a company on the foundation of trust. Yesterday I learned that that trust was betrayed, not by a stranger, but by my own son. I laid it out. I didn't spare myself. I made a mistake, I said, my voice clear. I made the mistake of blind trust. I was a father when I should have been a CEO. I stepped back, and in my absence, a rot, a sickness, took hold. My son stole $3.2 million from his mother's charity. There is no excuse. There is no aggressive accounting. It was theft. And he and everyone involved will face the justice system for that. The room was silent. But the company is not one man. It is the 800 employees who show up every day and do their jobs with honor. They are not thieves, and they will not be punished for the crimes of one. I leaned into the microphones for the final promise. I am back. Effective today, I am resuming full control as CEO. I will fix this, and I am making this pledge to my employees, my partners, and to the memory of my wife. I will personally replenish every single dollar that was stolen from the Isabella Fund, every last cent. The fund will be made whole not from the company's accounts, but from my own. My family broke this, and I will be the one to fix it. The press conference was the easy part. Saying the words was easy. The months that followed, that was the hard part. The legal battle was a slow, grinding, soul-crushing machine. Every day, Kate Walsh or George Tanaka would be in my office, their faces grim, showing me new depths of the betrayal. We discovered Leo hadn't just used Amelia's family. He had coerced and blackmailed junior employees, threatening their jobs if they didn't expedite his fake invoices. He hadn't just built a pipeline. He had poisoned the well, turning good people against the company, against me. The scandal ripped through our corporate culture like a disease. Employees were terrified. Were they next? Would they be implicated? Morale was at an all-time low. We lost 40% of our clients in the first 3 months. They didn't just walk away. They ran as if our company was radioactive. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I worked. I sold my quiet, comfortable condo and moved into the small corporate apartment on the top floor of the headquarters, the one Isabella and I had kept for emergencies. I was the first one in the building at 4 a.m. and the last one to leave long after midnight. I was 70 years old, but I worked like I was 30, fueled by coffee rage and a desperate need to save my wife's legacy. I was no longer just the founder. I was the chief financial officer, the head of marketing, and the chief janitor, all rolled into one. I didn't just run the numbers, I walked the floors. I met with every single key employee one by one in my office. I looked them in the eye. Leo is gone, I told them. The culture he created is gone. The lies stop today. From now on, we have 100% transparency. You have a problem, you come to me. You see something wrong, you report it. No more secrets. I rebuilt the company brick by painful brick. I personally called every donor who had pulled their funding. I understand your anger, I told them. I share it. But don't punish Isabella's memory for her son's crimes. Give me 6 months. Let me prove to you that we are still the company you trusted. Some hung up on me, but most of them listened, and I kept my promise. I liquidated a stock portfolio I had held for 30 years, the money I had set aside for my own retirement, and I wrote a personal check to the Isabella Reed Fund for $3,258,000. The day the check cleared, I held a company-wide meeting. I showed them the new healthy bank balance of the fund. The money is back, I told them. Every cent. This company is solvent, and the Isabella Fund is secure. Now we get back to work. But I couldn't do it alone. I was tired. I was old. And I couldn't trust anyone Leo had hired. I needed a partner. I needed someone who had Isabella's blood in their veins. I called Maya to the boardroom. She was exhausted, still running the diner by day and helping me handle the press calls by night. Maya, I said, I need you. Not just at the diner, I need you here. Dad, I don't know anything about being a COO. I just make hamburgers. You know how to run a profit and loss, I said. You know how to manage a team. But most importantly, you know how to treat people. You know what's right. You have your mother's instincts and you have her integrity. You are the only person on this earth I trust. I pointed to the empty chair beside me at the great mahogany table. I am officially naming you Chief Operating Officer of Reed Enterprises. You are the only one who can help me save this. She looked at the chair, terrified. And then she looked at me, and I saw her mother's strength settle onto her shoulders. She nodded. Okay, Dad, I'll do it. I won't let you down. And so we began. The work was brutal. We spent our days in back-to-back meetings with bankers, suppliers, and terrified employees rebuilding the trust my son had shattered. We spent our nights in the boardroom surrounded by spreadsheets and legal documents, undoing the tangled toxic web Leo had woven. It was 11 p.m. On a Tuesday, maybe our 40th straight day of work. We were both exhausted, our eyes burning. I don't get it, Maya said, rubbing her temples, staring at a stack of invoices. These numbers, it's just pure greed. That's all it ever is, honey, I said, rubbing my own tired eyes. I was hungry. I realized neither of us had eaten since breakfast. I picked up the phone. You know what we need, I said. We need a pizza. A pizza, pepperoni and mushroom, your mother's favorite. An hour later, we were still there alone in the giant, silent headquarters. The pizza box sat between us on the $1 million mahogany table. We were eating slices off of paper napkins. I looked across at my daughter, her face illuminated by her laptop screen, a smudge of tomato sauce on her cheek. And I smiled a real, genuine smile for the first time in months. Isabella and I had done this. So many nights in the early days in our tiny rented office, too broke for a steak, too tired to go home. Just us, a pizza, and a pile of invoices dreaming of a future. The circle had closed, but it was a new circle, a different one. We're going to be okay, Dad, Maya said, as if reading my mind. I know, I said, taking another bite of pizza. I know we are. The months spent rebuilding the company were a brutal, necessary distraction. But the trial was an execution. It was 6 months later. We were in a federal courtroom. It was cold, silent, and smelled of old paper and stale justice. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution table. Maya was beside me, her hand gripping mine so hard her knuckles were white. I watched them lead my son in. Leo wasn't a king anymore. He wasn't a COO. He was a defendant shackled at the ankles, his face pale and thin, his expensive suit replaced by ill-fitting clothes. Amelia was beside him, weeping silently, her own parents sitting 2 rows behind her, staring at the floor. The United States versus Leo Reed and Amelia Reed. The days blurred into a nightmare of testimony. George Tanaka was first a rock of cold, hard facts. He presented his audit, the flowcharts, the shell companies, the wire transfers. He explained the forgery of my signature with the precision of a surgeon. Maya was next. She cried as she testified, recounting how her brother had dismissed her, lied to her, and locked her out of their mother's fund. Then they called my name. The prosecution calls Benjamin Reed to the stand. My legs felt like cement. I had to walk past the defense table. I did not look at him. I could not. I took the oath, my hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth against my own son. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It felt like a betrayal, even though he was the traitor. For 2 hours, the prosecutor led me through it. The discovery, the restaurant confrontation, the audit, the meaning of the fund. And what was this fund for, Mr. Reed? It was for my wife, I said, my voice thick. It was for people who had nothing. It was for families. Then came the cross-examination. Leo's lawyer, Alan the Shark from the boardroom, stepped up. His new strategy was clear: if you can't fight the facts, attack the witness. Mr. Reed, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy, this must be very difficult for you. It is, I said. Difficult, I imagine, to see your son, your only son, surpass you, to see him running the company you built, but better, making it more profitable, more modern. The prosecutor objected. Relevance. It speaks to the witness's motive, Your Honor, Alan shouted. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, overruled. I'll allow it, but watch your step, counselor. Alan smiled. Isn't it true, Mr. Reed, that you were jealous of your son's success? I looked at him. My son's salary was $400,000 a year. I gave him a $2 million down payment on his house. I was paying for his life. What exactly was I jealous of? You were jealous of his control, Alan pressed. You're a man who can't let go. You're 70 years old. You couldn't stand that he was running things without you. So you manufactured this, you found a few accounting errors, and you blew them up to destroy him, to take back your company. The courtroom murmured. I looked at the jury. I looked at the judge. Then I looked at my son. I didn't manufacture the Aspen ski lodge he bought with stolen money, I said, my voice calm. I didn't manufacture the Bentley he bought for his wife. And I certainly did not manufacture the 36 separate forged signatures he used to steal $3.2 million from a charity. He did that all by himself. The lawyer had no more questions. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty, on all counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion. We returned for sentencing. The judge was not kind. She spoke of the sacred trust of a charity. She spoke of the profound, staggering arrogance of stealing from the memory of one's own mother. Amelia, who had cooperated fully in the end, betraying her husband just as she had betrayed me, was given 5 years' sentence, suspended with probation. Then the judge turned to Leo. Mr. Reed, she said, you had every advantage. You had a father who gave you an empire. You had a mother who left a legacy of kindness. You had everything. And you chose consciously to poison it all for greed. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. 10 years. The number just hung in the air. Amelia sobbed, but I saw the look of relief on her face. She was free. Leo just stood there, swaying as if he'd been punched. He was pale. He couldn't breathe. Bailiff, the judge ordered. 2 marshals moved in. They stood behind him. They told him to put his hands behind his back. I watched frozen as they put the cold steel handcuffs on my son's wrists. He winced. And then for the last time he turned. He looked at me. His eyes, his mother's eyes, found mine across the courtroom. I was expecting anger. I was expecting hatred. I was expecting a final curse. But there was nothing. There was no anger, no sadness, no remorse. There was just a void, an emptiness. It was the blank, hollow stare of a man I did not know, a stranger. My son was gone. The marshals turned him, and they led my son away out of the courtroom, out of my life. A year passed, 12 long, grinding months. Life, I learned, does not stop for grief or scandal. It just continues. The company, my company, was stable. It was smaller, leaner, humbled. Maya, my daughter, was a natural. She had her mother's empathy and my head for numbers. She didn't just manage, she healed. She walked the floors of every restaurant she knew, every employee's name. She rebuilt the trust I had lost, and the trust her brother had destroyed. The Isabella Fund was alive. We had made it whole as I had promised. The donors, seeing our commitment, seeing Maya's honest leadership, slowly, cautiously began to return. The empire had survived, but it felt hollow. I was in my office signing payroll when the call came. A blocked number. It was the chaplain from the Allenwood Federal Correctional Institution. "Mr. Reed, your son Leo is asking to see you. It's the first time he's requested a visitor." My hand froze on the check I was signing. I hadn't seen him since the sentencing. I hadn't spoken his name. "I'll be there," I heard myself say. The drive to Pennsylvania took 4 hours. 4 hours of me staring at the highway, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, asking myself why I was going. The prison was a gray concrete scar on a beautiful green landscape. It was a place designed to crush the human spirit. I went through security, the metal detectors, the heavy buzzing doors, the cold stares of the guards. They led me to a small, bright, sterile room, divided by a thick pane of plexiglass. I sat on a hard plastic stool and waited. The door on the other side opened. A guard led him in. The man who sat down opposite me was not my son. My son was a king. Confident, arrogant, tailored, strong. This was a ghost. Leo was thin. Shockingly thin. His vibrant dark hair was gone, replaced by a dull, shaved stubble. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a faded tan prison uniform, 2 sizes too big. But the real change was his eyes. The arrogance, the cold fire I had seen in the boardroom, the blank void I had seen at the sentencing. It was all gone. The man looking at me through the glass just looked empty and tired. So very, very tired. He picked up the black telephone receiver on his side. I picked up mine. "Dad," he said. His voice was a dry, broken rasp. I just nodded. I couldn't find my words. We sat in silence for a full minute, the only sound, the hiss of the static on the line. He spoke first. "I'm sorry." He whispered, his eyes on his own chapped hands, which were resting on the metal counter. I know that word means nothing from me, but I have to say it." He finally looked up, and I saw his mother's eyes, now just haunted, broken pools. "I'm sorry, Dad. Not because I got caught. I was sorry about that for the first 6 months. But I'm sorry for what I did." I waited. I had to know. "Why, Leo?" My voice was just as quiet. "That's the only thing I don't understand. Why, you had everything. You had the company. You had the money. You had our trust. It was all going to be yours. Why?" He looked down again, shaking his head, a slow, painful movement. "Because I never felt like I deserved it," he whispered. I never felt like it was mine. I was always your son, Benjamin Reed's son, the boy who inherited it all. Everyone Everyone looked at you and then they looked at me, and I could see it in their eyes. They knew I'd never be you. He took a shaky breath. I wanted to prove to myself mostly, that I could do it too. That I was smart. That I could make my own money, my own empire. Something you didn't just give me. So you stole, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a clarification. I started small, he said, his voice cracking. Just shortcuts. An aggressive investment here, a creative contract there. I told myself it wasn't stealing, it was just business. The way the real players did it. And then, Amelia. He winced as if saying her name caused him physical pain. She pushed me. She loved the money. She loved the things. The Aspen house, the car. She made me feel like a king, like a provider, like I was the one doing it, not you. And I got addicted to that feeling. I got addicted to finally feeling bigger than you. You can't blame her, Leo, I said, my voice hard. She pushed, but you drove. It was your choice. You forged my name. I know, he said, tears now streaming silently down his pale cheeks. I know. It was my choice. It was my greed. I hated living in your shadow, Dad. I hated it so much that I burned down the whole house just to get away from it. I looked at my son, this broken stranger in a tan uniform, and for the first time in over a year, the ice in my chest, the block of cold, hard granite, it cracked. It didn't melt, but it cracked. He wasn't a monster. He was just weak. A weak, vain, foolish boy who had destroyed his life and nearly mine, all because he couldn't handle the weight of his own father's name. I didn't feel rage anymore. I just felt a profound, bottomless pity, a terrible, aching sadness for what he had thrown away. I placed my hand on the cold, thick plexiglass. Leo looked up at my hand. The road to redemption is long. Leo, I said, my voice thick. It's not about what you say in this room. It's about what you do every day for the next 10 years. It's about who you are when no one is watching. He nodded, covering his own hand on his side of the glass, mimicking my gesture. I know, Dad, he whispered. I know. It starts here, I said. This is your beginning. Don't waste it. When I stood up, I couldn't stay any longer. I walked out of the room, leaving him there. I didn't know if I would ever forgive him. I didn't know if forgiveness was even possible for something this deep. But as I walked out of that gray concrete hell and into the sunlight, I understood him. And that I realized was almost as painful as not understanding him at all. It was 8 months later. 8 months since my visit to Allenwood. 8 months of rebuilding not just a company, but a family. I stood in the lobby of the flagship restaurant, the same lobby where I had been humiliated, the same lobby where my son's life had imploded. But tonight, the room was not cold. It was blazing with light, warmth, and life. It was the night of the Isabella Reed Charity Gala, the one they had tried to ban me from, the one we had rebuilt. The room was packed, not with Leo's shallow, fast money crowd, but with the real heart of the city. Doctors, teachers, community leaders, old friends, and our most loyal long-term employees, all dressed in their finest. The press was here too, but this time their cameras were aimed at a stage of hope, not a scene of a crime. Maya, my daughter, stood beside me. She wasn't in her diner apron. She was in a simple, elegant black dress that her mother would have loved. She looked radiant, confident, and for the first time in a year, she looked happy. "It's a full house, Dad," she whispered, squeezing my arm. They actually came back. Your mother always knew how to draw a crowd. I said, my voice thick. I looked across the lobby past the crowds to Isabella's statue. One of the staff had placed a single perfect white rose in her bronze hand. It was time. Maya and I walked through the buzzing dining room past the tables of our donors, the ones who had stayed, and the ones who had returned, and stepped up onto the small stage. A hush fell over the room. I stepped to the microphone. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady. "Welcome, and thank you for being here. A year ago in this very room, my family and my company fell apart. You all read the headlines. You all saw the pictures. I stood here a man who had lost his way and discovered the trust I had built over 45 years was broken. And it was broken by my own son." The room was silent. I could hear a pin drop. The Isabella Reed Fund, my wife's sacred legacy, was violated. It was stolen from not by a stranger, but by family. And I was the father who let it happen. I paused. I looked at Maya, who smiled at me, giving me strength. "I stand here tonight to tell you that the debt is paid. As of last month, our lawyers, through the sale of every asset purchased with that stolen money, the house in Aspen, the Bentley, the bank accounts, we have recovered every single cent. $3,245,800 is back in the fund where it belongs." A wave of applause of pure, heartfelt relief swept the room. People were standing cheering. I held up my hand. "Thank you. But I also stand here to tell you that I am 71 years old. I am an old man, and I have learned in the hardest way possible that my time for running this empire is over. An empire is only as strong as its successor. And I chose poorly. I was blinded by pride. I was blinded by what I wanted my heir to be, not what he was. I ignored the person who was standing right beside me all along, the one who had her mother's integrity, the one who had the courage to tell me the truth even when it was painful, the one who worked in the trenches, not in the spotlight." I turned to my daughter. Her eyes were shining with tears. "The future of Reed Enterprises and the future of the Isabella Reed Fund cannot be trusted to a memory. It must be trusted to a heart. Her heart." I took Maya's hand and raised it in the air. "So it is my profound honor to officially announce my retirement and to introduce you to the new Chief Executive Officer of Reed Enterprises and the new President of the Isabella Reed Fund. My daughter, my partner, and my true heir, Maya Reed." The room exploded. The applause was thunderous. Our employees, George, Kate, all of them were on their feet, weeping and cheering. Maya hugged me, her arms tight around my neck, sobbing into my shoulder. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. I held her tight. "No, Maya," I whispered back. "Thank you. You saved us. Your mother, she would be so proud of you." I stepped back, leaving her at the podium in the spotlight where she belonged. I walked to the side of the stage, out of the light. I watched my daughter, strong and sure, begin to speak, begin to lead. I thought of Leo in that gray, sterile room in Pennsylvania, 1,000 miles away. A hollow ache, the phantom limb of a father's love, pained my chest. I had lost my son. That was a tragedy that no amount of money could ever fix. But as I looked out at the room, at the new donors writing new checks, at my daughter standing tall at my wife's statue watching over us, I felt a profound and final sense of peace. The empire was safe. The legacy was secure. Isabella's heart was in good hands. Here is the lesson I learned, the one that cost me my son. What I learned in the most painful way possible is that there is a terrible difference between trust and blind trust. For years, I was a father when I should have been a CEO. I learned that the deepest betrayals come from those closest to us. They use your love as a shield for their greed, counting on the fact that you will never have the heart to stop them. But sometimes you must make the choice that breaks your own heart. I had to choose between my son and my wife's legacy. I chose honor. I learned that the true heir isn't the one who demands it, but the one who quietly every single day lives the values you fought for. If my story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next story. Most of all, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Have you ever had to face a betrayal like this? What would you have done?